Yes, that would be great.
Learned our lesson.
So thanks again to everyone who's joining. I am recording now. Thank you to Philiip for spending his time and expertise with us again, and thanks to all of you for joining. I'm going to turn it over to Philiip, and I'm going to go ahead and mute myself until we need to chat. So thanks again, Philiip.
Thank you, Christine, for the opportunity to speak to your student again. As you know, my name is Philiip. Today, I'm going to present about coding qualitative data. And as I always say during my presentation, if you have any question, feel free to stop me anywhere and ask, or you can type in your question, and then Christine will be happy to read the question to me. So I'm going to talk about coding qualitative data. And as you are aware, qualitative data is all about you are trying to reduce your data, right? The end result is you want to summarize the data that you have been given. So it's all about data reduction. So how do you do it? You extract significant information that you think will help you to address the research question, and then you assign labels to those significant information. And the label will be like, a phrase or maybe a word to help you address the research questions. So at the end of the day, you might develop quotes, themes. You sometimes can develop a theory based on the data that you have and also the research question that you want to address. So there are, we can say, 4 stages in terms of data analysis. So the first stage is coding. The second stage is categorizing. So you want to group the codes based on similarities and different similarities. And then based on that, you can develop themes. And then sometimes you cannot just use the themes to address the research question. You have to also see the connection between the themes, and based on the connection, you address the research question. And then the last stage is communicating. You have to tell your audience how you analyze the data and also what you found. So that's the process. So coding is all about tagging or labeling significant information you have identified from the literature, or not the literature, but say the data that you have. So you go to your data, you identify significant information, and you develop a phrase. And then maybe it could be a word, and then you use it to represent the significant information. At the same time, you are addressing the research question. So the codes or the themes that you're going to develop has, they have two roles. The first role is to represent the significant information. The second role is to help you address the research question that you have. And there are 3 main strategies that you could use to do the coding, right? The first one is description-focused coding. We also have interpretation-focused coding and presumption-focused coding. So description-focused coding is all about, you identify significant information and then you develop a phrase. So it's like you are condensing or trying to summarize what you have identified in the literature. Why do I always say literature? In your data. And then you develop a phrase, right? So it's just like summary. You are not going to interpret the data per se. You are just reporting what you found. So no interpretation, right? So when you are describing a behavior or participant describe their behavior, you are just summarizing the description of the behavior. You are not going to say, ask yourself, what does this behavior mean, right? That would be interpretation, right? You are trying to make sense. You have to first understand what the participant is saying, make meaning of that information, and then develop, based on the meaning, develop code, right? And so that's also about interpretation-focused coding. The last one is presumption focused coding. So with presumption, normally you use it when you want to develop a theory. So how do you do it? You identify significant information. So that significant information will be evidence, right? And based on evidence, you make your conclusions. So you make a claim based on that evidence, and that claim will be called code. So at the end of the day, you have a couple of claims, and then you have evidence from the data to support those claims. So the claims will be called codes, right? So this is a diagram that I developed based on my book on qualitative and analyzing qualitative data. So you can see here that, let's say if the purpose of your study is to, or if your intent is to just describe the phenomenon, right? Then descriptive description focused coding will be the best strategy. So if it's not describing your phenomenon or describing the data is not your focus, but you want to make sense of the data, then interpretation focused coding will be the strategy you have to use.
Philip, there's a question. What does DIT stand for?
DIT is acronym for the 3 strategies. So the description focused coding, interpretation focused coding, and presumption focused coding. So to help students to remember, I just made it deep coding method a decision tree. So that's how. And the last one, if you want to develop a theory or a model to explain a specific phenomenon, right? Or then you can use a presumption focused coding. And in my book, I gave a lot of examples of how to use this. But for this presentation, because of time, I will be giving you some examples, right? But this is just a big picture of the main coding strategy you could use. You can choose one of them or you can combine 2. It all depends on your research question, the purpose of your study, and the data that you have, right? Do you have any question concerning the coding strategies? Okay. So after coding, what next? You have to categorize, right? So categorization is just thinking about it like you are sorting, right? Looking at the relationship between the codes and then trying to group them based on similarities. At the end of the day, based on that, you'll be able to develop themes or categories and sometimes theory. So in terms of the strategy for categorizing data, or categorizing code, there are 3 strategies: individualized based sorting strategy, group based sorting strategy, and presumption based strategy. So individual based means that you as a researcher, you are doing the sorting, right? You are not involving any other researchers to help you. You are just you with the codes, and then you try to sort them, right? The first option is the one that most researchers use because, doing qualitative analysis, most of the time you do it individually, you don't involve a lot of people. The group-based is where after developing codes, you may identify few participants, maybe 10, minimum of 10 participants, and then you give them the codes for them to sort it based on how they understand the content of the code, right? So there's each individual sort it and then sort the code and bring it back to you, and then you use statistics to categorize them. At the end of the day, you come up with categories that represent the individual sorting strategies that they use, right? So this is where you involve people. Most of the time when you are doing program evaluation and you want to involve stakeholders, yes, or involve beneficiaries of the program, you can use this kind of strategy, right? So most of the time, people use it in program evaluation because you want to involve either the beneficiaries of the program or the stakeholders to be part, so that they will be able to use the findings. The more you involve them, the more they become interested in using what you found. Presumption focus strategy is very similar to what we have talked about. But in this case, we view all the codes as evidence, right? And then you come up with claims. Those claims will be the thieves, right? So you review the codes, and then you come up with conclusions, and then you connect the codes to those conclusions to support them. So at the end of the day, you come up with those claims, and the claims could be thieves. And as I said, my book talks a little bit about that. So this one is the individualized one. So as you can see, you can have a nice table, have maybe 5 columns representing 5 clusters. You can have more than 5, but I always recommend that you have 5 or less. So what you do is that you evaluate each of the themes that you codes that you have, and then you put them into the various clusters based on how similar they are with the existing members of the code. So as you can see here, I'm doing the sorting, right? So I put them into their various. So what I do is that when I identify, I look at the code and look at the existing codes that I have in the system, in the clusters. If they have nothing, no relationship, then I put it in the empty cluster. So based on that, I was able to group them into 4 clusters. And as I'm hoping that it will show, I think we can wait because I just want to show you something here. So after you have sorted them, sometimes you have to go back and then review, and sometimes you have to move some of the code to another category or another cluster because you think that it will be best located in a specific cluster than the other. So it's all about thinking through the code that you develop and trying to put them into various clusters. And then you have to be flexible in this stage because great ideas will come in mind, and then you realize that, oh, I have to put this in this information or this code in cluster 1 instead of cluster 3. So that's how it's done. I just want this one to finish. Okay, so as you can see here, after you group them into various clusters, then you label, you examine the content, right? You examine the cluster members, that the codes, and based on that, you label it. You give it a label that represent all the codes under those clusters, right?
Philip, we had a question. Are you using the words clusters and categories interchangeably, or are they 2 different things, clusters and categories?
Yes, so
and themes. So there's like a couple different words that we're using. Do they all mean the same thing? Or?
Yes. So normally, in a normal sense, you move from codes and go to categories, and the final stage is the themes. But sometimes, because when you reach a stage where you cannot go further, right, you can call category as themes because you are not going to, the end product is the theme, right? So at the end of the day, if you have maybe four categories, you can label it as themes because you are not going to do further analysis to develop things. You have end the process, right? So sometimes you can use it interchangeably, right? If you have a lot of codes and you think that you can put them into maybe 10 clusters, then those 10 clusters could be categories. And then you move to the next stage and see, okay, can I regroup the clusters so that at the end of the day, I can have themes? But if you cannot go further, then you can call the categories themes. So we can use it interchangeably. And also, sometimes when you are doing the analysis, and you realize that you ended up having maybe only 5 codes, right? And then you end there, you don't want to go further. Those 5 codes could be called themes. So in some books, they use the codes and themes interchangeably, but in the traditional sense, you move from codes and you go to categories, and then you go to themes. But sometimes when people are doing analysis, instead of saying that I'm developing codes, they can say I'm developing themes. So it's all about your explanation. Like it's very important for if you are talking about it, you have to explain the concept, right? So in terms of if you are using codes, you can. If you are using theme instead of codes, you can also define what you mean by that. I think that would be useful. Okay. So the presumptive, I think I've talked about it. So as I said, you view the codes as evidence, and then you generate themes or categories, and you call them, claims, right? So that's all about that. But as you can see, as I said, this approach in individual-based sorting strategy is the most used strategy compared to the other two, sorry. So this also is a decision table to help you decide whether you're going to use individualized or group-based. So I think that I've already talked about that. If you want to develop a model or a theory, then presumption focus coding, focus strategy will be the best. And if you want to sort the data yourself as a researcher, that individualized base. If you want to involve a group of people, and sometimes you want to involve experts, right? The most important thing is that you have to get 10 or above participants to do the sorting in order for you to do better analysis. So this is a way of deciding which strategy you want to use. Any question?
I have a question. When
yes.
you just mentioned having multiple people look at it to get, is that when the whole issue of inter-coder reliability comes into play?
It's very different. So this one, they are not going to help you with developing codes per se. Mm-hmm. You only involve them when you are finished developing the codes.
Okay.
Yes. So what happened is that instead of you individual doing the sorting based on your understanding of the codes, you give the codes to them, and you have to give them the definition of each of the codes so they know what the codes represent, and then tell them, okay, can you sort it based on your understanding of these codes? How do you want to group them? And then you'll get, maybe for each of the participants, they will have their own groupings, and then you put everything in SPSS or a software.
Jamovi?
I haven't tried that because I haven't tried that. Maybe I have to look at the options there because it has. You have to.
I know. I get the point though that you mean.
Yes, because we have something like multi-dimensional scaling analysis that you have to do, and another one, hierarchical cluster analysis. So these are the two analyses. If the software can do that, yes, you can use the software. I haven't looked at that yet. But most of the time I use SPSS to do this analysis. And I have a presentation on that. I use this kind of thing for my dissertation. So if you want to know detailed information about sorting with involving groups, you can contact me and I can give you the link to my presentation on that. So after you have done everything, let's assume you have developed your themes, right? What next? Normally you move to the connection part when you realize that the individual themes cannot independently address your research question. Let's say your research question is asking about how does maybe how do instructors develop maybe a program, or how do instructors develop a course, right? So you can see that you want to capture a process. So this means that developing individual teams might not be able to address this kind of question. So after developing the theme, you have to find a connection between the themes so that you can see that are the themes happening at the same time, or can one team come under another theme? Or so this is where you find out what kind of relationship do they have. And based on that, you can construct the connection that will help you to address your research question that you have. So you move to connecting themes based on a research question. If your research question is such a way that you can individually, you can address the research question with individual themes, you don't have to move into talking about the connection, right? Or working on the connection between them. But as I said, my book talks about how to do it, step-by-step process. The next one is to present your findings or communicating your results. Is any question coming?
Amy, do you want to ask your question? I see you have one.
Yeah, I thank you. Can you go back one slide, Philip?
Yes.
Thank you. Okay, so I'm this is pretty new to me. But I'm listening really hard, and I didn't know how to express this in my typing, so that's why I'm doing it out loud. So I'm understanding this connecting themes, and you said you get your themes, you get your codes, and then you're looking at the relationships. My question is, should we be specifically writing that down, or does that just kind of happen? Because to me, it seems like that would just happen naturally, the way my brain thinks. But do we need to actually stop and like write down, these are the things I see connecting? Like I just learned that we have to write down like our search terms and things like that, so do I need to stop my thinking process?
Yeah, I think we call it analytical memoing, right? You are reflecting on the characteristics of each theme and see whether there's any kind of connection. Is there a chronological relationship between some of the codes? Is there any embedding relationship? Is there any causal relationship? These are the questions you have to ask yourself. That's one theme comes before the other. Are the themes happening at the same time? So you ask yourself this question as you examine the characteristics of each theme. So you look at a theme, you look at what a theme represents. You also look at significant information that are connected, or significant or relevant information that are from the data that are connected to the themes. And based on that, you can see the connections. But you don't have to do that if you think that the themes that you have coming up will individually address the research question. Let's go back to this one. What I will do is that I'm doing an illustration for you to see the process, but I thought the video, let me see whether we can go to the latter part. So you can see that, you see this research question, I don't know, it's very small. What acquired strategies do participants plan to utilize, right? So I'm looking for acquired strategies that participants are going to utilize. So this research question, you can identify specific strategy that you're going to do. You don't have to find a connection between the themes after I've developed the themes. So one strategy that one participant or a group of participants want to do is to promote college-like classes, right? So that's one strategy. You don't have to, it's a standalone theme that doesn't need support from other teams for you to address the research question with. So when I reach here,
that makes sense. I'm just wondering, kind of like, as you go through this process, should you be recording, like writing down somewhere where what you just described? Okay, so I see this as a theme or a cluster all on its own. It doesn't really hinge on the other ones. Like, should I be writing that down to keep track of it, or
yeah, you can write them down. We call
is it not really
procedural.
part of the process? Is it more just cognitive?
You can write it down for your own kind of reference. What your audience needs from you is the main steps that you took to arrive at your themes.
Great.
Right?
Okay.
So the personal reflection is your own that you can choose to share. If you think it's going to be helpful to your audience, if you think it's going to help your audience to trust what you found.
Okay. I like that. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Thank you very much. That's helpful.
Yeah. Any other question? So, you know, as I always say, if the terms are new to you, don't worry, we have recorded this. And I have, you know, other presentation online that you can look at. So if it's, you know, this information is new to you, don't worry about that. I think that one thing that you have to, if you forget about everything, one thing you have to notice that at least you have to know what description focused coding is all about. Maybe interpretation focused coding. You also need to know individual based sorting. That's a popular strategy that you could use. And so that's all that you need to know. And the connecting is not really relevant if you're not planning to connect themes. And the last one is the presentation of your findings, right? So in presentation of your findings, they are divided into three. The first one is to present the context. The context is where you present information about your participant, right? So let's say you collected data from participants. People want to know how many participants, what are the demographic information, any other background information that will help your audience to better understand who you talk to and who you collected the information from, right? The next stage is to talk about the main data analysis process, right? So, you know, the step-by-step process, that which I'm going to show you later in my presentation. And the last stage is to present the themes based on the research question. So you state the research question, you state the theme, you talk about how, what the theme represents, and also you can also use evidence from the data to support the theme. So that's all about, you know, communicating your findings. When you are doing this, always have to think about your audience, because you are not writing it for yourself. You are writing this information to your audience. So think about, what information can I provide that will help them to understand my findings and also help them to trust what I found? Because qualitative analysis is more of a subjective experience, if you don't give detailed information about how you arrive at your findings, people are going to question your findings. So it always have to, you know, as you are going through the process, you can document the process. So how did you identify significant information? How do you develop theme codes? How did you transform the codes into categories or themes? You know, having the detailed information will help people to trust what you found. So, in terms of information about manual coding, you know, manual coding is where you are doing it without using the software, right? That's where I'm going to show you right now. You can also use a software like in Vivo to do the analysis. And I have, I use the same data I'm gonna did for the manual one, and I use it for, and I recorded that analysis and posted it on YouTube. So you can click on this to view if you want to use a software. Normally use a software when the data is not a lot. The data that I had, I was given by Christine, wasn't a lot. So I was able to use it manually. I analyzed it manually without using the software. But also I tried using the software, and this is the video for that. So when you get my PowerPoint and also other materials, you'll be able to go there and get more information. So let's shift to the demonstration. So, so if you want to analyze your data manually, right, these are the steps that you have to follow, right? You first have to clean your data. So data cleaning is all about taking out all the information that we call it identifiable information, the information that you can, if you don't take care, people can easily identify your participants. So you have to, clean the data, make sure that everything is ready for your analysis. And then the second stage is to, you state your research question and label it, right? The reason why you have to label your research question is you're going to develop codes under them, right? You don't want to miss them, miss the codes, and then you'll give yourself too much work if you don't develop codes under each of the research questions. Because if that is the case, you have everything together, you have to go back and see which code belongs to which research question. It's gonna give you a lot of work. So you have to label your research questions so that you'll be able to develop codes under each of them. You choose the best coding strategy, what we're going to do. And then you have to code the data. After that, you have to compile the codes and then arrange them alphabetically, which I'm going to show you right now. And then you tally the code. Tally means that you have to count the significant information connected to a specific code. And then you sort it, using individual-based sorting strategy. And lastly, you label your clusters to form category or to form themes. So these are the 9 steps that you have to follow. So this was the data I was given. I don't know whether I think you might be familiar with this data. Christine, can you give a little background?
Sure. We're still seeing your PowerPoint slide. Just weren't that. I don't know if that's what you intend for us to see, but that's what we're still seeing.
Oh, can you repeat what you said?
I said we're still seeing your PowerPoint slide, so I don't know if you.
Oh. Wow. I thought I was showing, so I was not sure. Okay, let me see. I'm not familiar. Okay, let me share. Oh.
You might have done like share application instead of.
Oh, okay. So this is what I was talking about. I'm so sorry. I didn't know. We use GoToMeeting. So GoToMeeting, when you straight automatically go to the next place that you want to go. I didn't know.
No worries, it's fine.
So this is what I was talking about. So you clean the data, state, label the research question.
And we have all these handouts. So you'll be getting all of these materials. Okay. Philip has already shared them. So don't worry if you're trying to write them all down, you'll get a copy of it.
And then this is the data that I was talking about.
So this is the, so I'll just set the context. This is the same data that Crystal has been using, but Philip is focusing on the open-ended answers to the question. So these were 3 different college readiness institutes that we had done at the state level, where there were high school and community college partners coming together, and these are the survey questions about whether or not the participants found it valuable. And you can see some of the questions are like, share a strategy that you would take back or additional feedback. So it's not necessarily what you would probably be doing, but we wanted to use the same kind of data set so you could see how to analyze not just the quantitative elements, but also the qualitative elements.
Okay, so thank you for the background information. So, so what I did is I went through and took what I want, right? And so this is the final document that I have. So I label my participant P1, P2, P3 until I get to the last part, so P52. I took information about their gender, I took information about their age, and also I took this information that I might not need it, but in case I need it. So what I'm interested in is this one. You know, they were asked this question. Let me go back to the main one. Please share a strategy you will take back to your school or college, right? So this is the response that they gave. And also I took this one. So I took two things, right? I want, oh, okay, sorry. I took this one. So I took this one, what was very valuable about this syllabus activity. So this is what I took, and I also took the strategies. Okay, so these are the two open-ended responses that I took from so that I can use it to analyze the data. So I labeled them at the top. So that's all that I took. And then so what I did was I just selected the first column that I need. I right-click on it, copy, and then put it on a Word document because I want to analyze the data here on the Word document, not in Excel. So this is what, so you can see here. So these are the questions that were asked of participants, and then these are the responses. So you can see all of it. So I just copied and pasted them here. So let me do one example for you to see how I did it.
Are you showing us still in the Excel, or did you switch over to?
Oh, I should. Okay, let me go back to the S. Oh, I was in Excel. So
if you want to stop sharing your screen for a second and you just share your screen versus application, it might be easier. It's up to you.
Oh, so how do you do it? You go.
Just do stop share, and then when you go to share your screen again, instead of clicking like an application, do share your screen, and that way anything on your screen will be shown.
Oh, okay.
That's the one that lets you bounce around a little easier. That way you don't have to worry about.
So share.
The top one in the left.
Yeah,
corner.
the first one. Share your.
Oh, the first one. Okay. So now let me change it to.
Go.
Now,
okay.
yeah.
Yes.
Now we can see.
Perfect.
Yeah.
Okay, so I just copy it here and then open a Word document and then pasted it here. And I try to arrange it well so that it will be very easy for me to analyze. So I just copy and pasted it, and then I make it bold to show that.
Well, if I could hop in with a paste tip, so everyone saw pasting. So the original paste kept the formatting of like the Excel. So when you go to
but
paste,
you have an option to change it. So I changed the format there. So let me do another example.
Yeah,
so
because some people are not too familiar. There we go. So your paste options, and if you do the last one with the A on it, then that just cleans. That just clean puts the text on there.
Yes, it takes this option.
I know some people are not too familiar with Excel and all that.
Thank you. And also, I just wanted to make sure that I know which, I know that each information is coming from one participant. So what I selected everything, I went here, make it like a bulletin. Oh, where did I go? Okay. So, okay, so I did a bulletin just to separate them. So I know that this is from one participant, this is from the second participant, this is from the third participant. Right. So that's how I did it. And then, so let's assume that we finished the data cleaning. So that's the first step. The next step is to label your research questions. So I came up with 3 research questions based on the questions that they asked them, right? So the first question, which aspects of the syllabus activity did participants consider valuable? So I just came up with a phrase, right? And a phrase could be in between 2 to 5 words, but the smaller the phrase, the better. Just to remind you, we don't have a perfect phrase, but it just remind you that, oh, this phrase is for research question 1. This phrase is for research question 2, right? So you just assign labels to your research question. So I came up with 3 research questions based on the questions that they ask participants. And then, so these are the labels I'm going to use, and I'll show you how I use it when we go to the next step. So the next one is to choose the best coding strategy. Can you help me? I know you might know the answer, but can somebody help me? Which strategy do you think is the best, and why? So we can go back again to look at the research question. So remember that they were asked about which aspect of the activity that they think is valuable. And the research question I came up with is so direct. So this means that I'm assuming that I'll be able to get that information directly from their responses, right? So I don't have to make sense of it before I can get, or I don't have to interpret their response before I can address this question, right? Because they were asked this kind of direct question, right? So, and so all these questions are more descriptive. And looking at their responses, sometimes you have to just give a quick review of the responses, and you can see that the information here this information can directly address the research question. Because of that, description focused coding will be the best. If the information that you are looking for from the data was hidden, right, then you can use interpretation focused code, because you have to make sense of that information. One example is that maybe you are a psychologist and then you are interviewing participants, and a person has given you a lot of describe his or her behavior to you, right? Based on the description of the behavior, you interpret, because your research question is, what is the condition of this person, right? So you have to assess the behavior at the end, then you come up with a condition, right? So this means that you are interpreting that information, because the information that the person is giving you will not directly address the question that you have. You have to make sense of it before you address. But if you are looking for what are the specific behaviors participant is showing, right? And the person describe day-to-day behavior, you don't have to make sense of the data before you can address the research question, because the person have already given you describe what they do, right? And then you can get that information. So it's all about looking at the content of the data and looking at your research question and say, okay, can I access the information without interpreting or making sense of it? Is the information hidden, or is just there? You can get that information without, doing further analysis or further reflection and see what the person means. Right. So looking at this, I would choose the description focused coding. And I've given a brief information here to show the rationale behind my decision. It doesn't necessarily mean that if you use interpretation focused coding, you are wrong, but we are choosing the best coding method that you want to use, right? Based on the research question that you have and the data that you have. So the next stage is to code your data. So how do you code? I go through each of the statements. So if you can see here, the first participant said textbook to go along with course syllabi. This is more of a suggestion that the person is giving. So you can see that it's addressing research question 2, right? Because, you know, it's all about what they suggest, ways to improve the activities, right? So because it's a suggestion, I first brought the label of the research question there to remind me that this one is for research question 2. And then I developed a code which should be in between 2 to 5 words to represent this one. So as you can see here, I'm not technically making sense of it. I'm just reporting what the person said. And there's not going to be a perfect code, but you just have to come up with a phrase that you think is representing the significant information at the same time addressing the research question that you have. So
Philiip, can I ask you a question real quick?
Yes.
If you have pretty focused research questions, do you have to code everything that they write, or could you not code everything if it's not related to one of your research questions?
If it's not related to one of your research questions, you don't have to do the coding, because at the end of the day, you want to address the research question that you have. The research question should drive what information you have to code. So as you can see, there are some information that I did not code. Let me see. Oh, I didn't code this one because I realized that maybe it's not addressing in none of my 3 research questions. So you just had code the ones that are addressing your research question.
Thank you. I think that's important to remember, that you always keep laser focused on what your question is, so that you're looking for data. So sometimes you can get lost in this qualitative coding process and you know, kind of get carried away and then start to create codes that may not have anything to do with your research question. So if somebody tucked in, you know, the food wasn't good, we need better food, you're not going to worry about coding that because it's not related to the question at hand.
And I think that's what I always tell students, because I sometimes see that some students, they just develop themes, and then I ask you, so which of the research question is these team addressing? And they cannot show, because they did not allow the research question to drive what information they have to identify and how do they have to code the information they have identified. So that's how I did. I went through, and also you have to be flexible. You can come back and change the label if you realize that maybe you have come up with a best label for that. You can come back and change. And as you can see here, there's a quotation. We call it in vivo coding. In vivo coding is using participant-owned words to do the coding. Right, so let me, so you see this one? So sometimes using participant words might be the best way. So, you know, you can, so for this example, I just use your own word to code. So, and here you can see the content specific. I think I got it here. So whenever you use their word to code, you have to quote it to remind you that it's participant information, not yours, but it's helping you to capture what, or to help you to capture the information, right, the significant information. And I think you also can see that, you know, suggestions, I always start with a verb and plus ing. I don't know, I've forgotten the term for that. Using a verb and adding, is it gerund or something like that? Yes. Using, like, instead of, because I want to capture their suggestions, sometimes it's good to use verb and add ing to it. Right. So example is like providing, right? Promoting, using a word and adding ing to it. So that's what I use to code my data. So let me go back here. Comparing, speaking, learning, providing. So you don't have to do it for all of them, but it's all, at the end of the day, come up with a phrase that will address your research question, right? So this is one of the strategies that I use. And you can see always, you can see that some of the phrases like this, I use it to code more than one places, because if they are referring to the same thing, I don't want to generate a new code, right? So what I do is that when you identify significant information, you think about, okay, what phrase do you have to use, or which research question is addressing that? So you indicate the research question that is addressing, and then you look at the existing codes that you have created, whether you can use one of them to represent that information. If it has nothing to do with the existing code, then you create a new one, right? So you can see that there are some places that have repeated the codes because they are connected to the existing code that I've already created. So I don't have to create a new one. So that's how I did, and I went through all of them and I created the codes to address the research question. So the next stage is to compile all of them. So how do you compile? Last week I tried to do it and it didn't work. So sometimes you end up having, let me quickly show you this strategy that I use. So you go to review and you click here and you go to advanced, and the comment area, you can indicate the width. So let's assume, let me reduce the width and show you what problem that I had last time. So let me make it 35, okay. So last time, yes, so you can see that some of the information that you've typed hasn't shown here, right? You have to click on it before you can see, because the width here is small, you have to increase it. That's why last time when I tried to copy, select and then press on shift and press down and to select everything, I wasn't able to do all of them, select everything, because of this problem. So if you finish it and you face this problem you cannot see, one option is to go to click on review and click here, the arrow down here, and go to advanced and increase the width. So let's increase it to maybe 6 inches. 6 and okay. So you see that here has become bigger compared to the previous one. So now you can see everything. This will make it easy for you if you want to copy all the codes you are developing and compile. So you first select the first code and you press on shift key, and you hold on the shift key and you press down to select everything. So it's selecting everything. So until you reach the last one, right? And then you right click on any of them to copy. And then you can paste. So I have all my codes here with the label for the research question. The next stage is to arrange it alphabetical order so that you can group them based on the research question that you have. So you select everything and you click on this one, AZ, to sort it. Click on OK. So you can see that it has grouped them based on the research question for you, right? And then you can separate them. So I have the third, I think this one is the third research question or the second one. I have to check. So the next stage is to tally them, right? Tally means that you are counting the number of codes and then indicating the numbers, right? So each of these represent one significant information. So there's a significant information that is connected to this code. There's a significant information that is connected to this code, right? And there are some of them where you use the code to connect to more than one significant information, especially this one. So it connected to 1, 2, 3, 4, 4 significant information. So how do you do it? You just go through. This one was connected to only one significant information because I can see only one. So in parentheses to indicate one. You do the same thing to this one. This one too is 1. But when you go to here is also 1. Here you use it to represent 2 significant information. So you have to type 2 here and delete the second one, because you have already indicated that this one is 2 significant information connected to this one. This one connects, you indicate 1. You indicate 1 here. And here, I think it's 5 significant information. So you indicate 5 here. And then delete the rest because you have already indicated that the 5. So you do the same thing, and then this is what you're going to get. Let's go back here. So you see what I have here. I tell you all of them. I have that information here. So the numbers there are showing you the number of significant information that are connected to this, the code that you have, right? So some significant information, 2 significant information, sometimes some 5, some 6, some 1. So that's how you do it. Any question? I think the time is going. Okay, so let me walk through quickly. So the next step is to sort them, and I think as I showed you in the video, you first have to create a table. This is, you do it for each of the research questions, right? So let's assume that we are focusing on the acquired strategy research question, right? So you just create, let me go back here. You create a table with about 4 clusters, and then you start dropping them into their various classes. So I always start with the dominant code. The dominant code is the code that has the highest frequency or the higher number of significant information connected to that, right? So you bring the dominant code here, and then you go through this information, you go through the codes, and then compare it with the existing classes and cluster members. If they don't have any relationship with the first one, we put in the second cluster. If they don't have any relationship, we put in the third cluster. So it's just like sorting. So as I said, I have this one online, so you can just click on it. I think I've already shown you this one. So I just want to, so when I I bring the information there, I just cancel it to make sure that, I've done with that code.
So now you're clustering by common responses, right?
Yes.
Okay.
So I just find the relation. So you take one and you find out, okay, where should I put it? If it has no relationship with the first, second cluster, you put it in the empty cluster. So that's how you do it. So when I finish, I go to the next stage where I examine each cluster members and find out, okay, would it be okay for me to move it to maybe a different cluster or something like that? So you just have to think about it and see. So you can see here that I'm trying to move them around to make sure that they best fit the cluster that they are. And then the next one is to label. You assess the content of the cluster and label them. The number there is if you add 65111, you get 12. So that's the 12 significant information connected to the theme. And so, and sometimes as you are trying to develop themes, you realize that, oh, I think maybe I have to collapse one of the classes and then bring it there because, you know, at the end of the day, you have to be very flexible, right? So you can change their cluster membership as you are even developing the theme. So you can see that it was 5, but now it's 4. Right. So that's all about that. And then when you're done, let me go back here. Yeah, you have your themes, and yes, done. And I just want to show you one last thing. In case you want to use the software like in Vivo, I also have a video on that. So what I did is I cleaned the data, right? Similar to what I showed you. And then I included demographic information. And then I send it to the in vivo software. Let me show you. So after, you know, what you have to do is after you have cleaned the data, you close the Excel spreadsheet and you open the software, and then you indicate the name of the project, you know. So you just, you know, label the project, and because you're gonna start a new project, so you have to click on the blank project and then name it, and then it opens to the software for you. And then what you have to do is when you go there, you import the Excel spreadsheets that you have created. And this is the process that you have to go through to import. And then at the end of the day, you get your Excel in the system. So it has all participants and the demographic information are there. And then you'll be, first of all, you have to also create notes for the research question. You know, the manual one, I just labeled the research question. Here, you create container for each of the research question. A big container. The reason why you have to create a container is that you're going to create small containers under this research question. The small containers will be the codes. So you create a container for each of the research question. And so you can see here that I have 2 of the research question created. No, it wasn't that. Okay. So these are the 2 information that are significant information that, or 2 information that I'm going to analyze, the strategy acquired and also the issue related to the whether the activity is valuable, which part of the activity is valuable. So this is how we do the coding process. You go through your participant responses, you select, and then you right click on that, and then click on code. And then you click on where you want to drop the code. So if it's about suggested improvement, you click on new node, and then you type in the label for the code that you want to create. And when you finish, you click on OK. And click on OK. Okay, so that's how we're gonna go through the same thing. You develop codes. At the end of the day, you can see that all the codes have been developed under each of their research question. You have all of them. And then, so now you can export your codes to go through the second stage, which is the sorting. The sorting, you cannot do it on the system. You have to do it outside and bring the themes back. So you do the sorting similar to the manual one, and then you bring the themes back. You create containers for the themes. So you see the themes here, and then you drop it's just like sorting. You drop the codes under each of the themes. So you just drag and drop. So at the end of the day, you can see that I've dropped it to the codes into the themes that I have. And then I think you are done. You do the same thing for all of the research questions. Sometimes you can do word cloud. This is participant responses, and it shows you the frequency, how many times a specific word, phrase, or words were used. So here you can see that college students were used many times by participants. You can also create a table and do some charts if you want to. You can also, sometimes you want to find this, you want to find out who are connected to this a particular team, which of the participants are connected to a particular team. So you can bring the participant information here, P20 and P24, and also you want to find out what is the demographic information of the participant. You can pull up that information too to show them their demographics. So it's to show you the background of each participant and link to this team. So this is just a big picture. You know, as I said, I'm just, because of time, I cannot go through everything, but this is just to show you how the software can do to, in case you want to use the software instead of doing it manually. So
well, thank
this
you,
is what
Philip.
I have. You're welcome.
Yeah, thank you. If your head's hurting a little bit too much with all of that, that's okay. You're not expected to know en vivo now.
Yes.
It really was just an exposure opportunity for you to kind of see some of the bells and the whistles associated with it, because he really has been focused predominantly on the manual coding, and that is not the only way to do it. So we will have more time with Philip. He's going to do a couple of other sessions for us in April. And hopefully we'll see him in July and some other times next year as well. We'll try to contract with him as well. So I know it's late. I want to be respectful of everyone's time. So I'm going to say thank you so much to you, Philip, and thank you to all of you students for hanging in there with us and learning about it. So I'm going to go ahead and stop recording.